Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Back in Arizona.
Back in studio.
Yeah, so it's good to be back.
Super happy to be back. We had, a few months on the road. Like I said, life on the road is rough.
Nothing like starting with a big topic. My gosh.
Yeah, absolutely. So what'd you do this weekend? We did a big remodel on our home.
Yeah. So while we were gone, we did a full remodel. Sold every piece of furniture, painted everything, changed out everything. So all new stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then
it's like a new house.
Then I had my birthday in Charleston, my 40th birthday, Charleston, South Carolina. It was great. Loved Charleston.
Yep.
And for those of you watching, if you go to Charleston, you have to check out Honey Hive. It was a dessert place, but it was such a cool ambiance and like totally awesome.
That's right.
So anyways, before we jump into anything today, we have your happy hour coming up next Monday with Jason Hartman.
Yeah. You guys are going to want to listen to this. You guys, I talk a lot about real estate, and, for those of you who are on the residential side, you're kind of defending real estate. For those of you on the commercial side, you get it. So Jason is going to clear it up because, his primary focus is single family. So he scours, he's been doing it for 40 years. He owns a lot of stuff. Plus, he has a whole bunch of programs that help people buy in different markets. So it's going to be a very cool topic about, the difference between what's really going on with real estate. I did a video Friday called Real Estate Reset. And it's funny, like, obviously, if you guys are buying single-family homes, you're not going to get it. And,
right.
Which is fine. I understand. But you can't ignore what's really happening in the world I'm in just because you're not in it. So it's going to be a good one, I think.
Yeah, because essentially, for those that don't know, the commercial real estate market is getting hit very hard. Even apartments are getting hit the least, hardest out of everything. But they are still, cap rates and things like that are still kicking in.
And right. And the point is if you're getting a single family loan from Bank of America, they're also lending on the commercial side. It's a bank. So, so the lenders, just because, the single family pricing continues to be stable and there's lack of supply and there's a zillion reasons why we'll get into, doesn't mean that people are getting clobbered over on the commercial real estate side.
Absolutely. So we are going to jump into our topic today. Make sure you hit the like button. We love that. It really helps us out.
Yeah.
But first, we're going to jump into our Twitter question of the week.
Oh, yeah.
See, we're really rusty because we haven't really been doing this live.
Let's go.
All right, Twitter question of the week, and it goes with what we're talking about today. Ken, you asked, if the U.S. were to go to war, how do you think it would impact the real estate market? And that's what we're going to talk about today. But Tim said, most certainly localized metros would have a benefit. Otherwise, a possible freeze because of price controls and population desire to nest at home.
Yeah, and I know we're going to jump into this topic, but I hope that you guys at least are open-minded on this, because if you're reading or watching the news, this is a topic. And so the question is not whether we are or aren't.
Right.
The question is what would happen if we do. That's all. So, a lot of you, I see already, like, we're getting some negatives, thumbs down, like, I don't want. It's like, this is what, people would call denial. You have to, like, wake up. Like, it doesn't mean it's happening, but you have to look at this, and there's some very compelling reasons why you should be considering this. So the point is not whether or not we're going to war. The point is, if we do, how does it affect the economy? How does it affect real estate? Because there's a real estate channel. And what can we do or you do in the meantime to position it, and what should you be watching? That's the entire point of this show. It's not to debate whether we're going to war or not. I think I want to make that point right out of the gate.
Right. So, anyways, thank you for your...
Well, I just, yeah.
Thank you for your soapbox. We'll go on to point number 2. Don Paulo says, great question. Is this war on U.S. soil? So, Interesting. And then let's go to number 3. Prices of the house and rent will go down and there will be less demand, but I don't know what will happen with interest rates.
Okay.
So it's interesting because none of these really follow what we research.
I still like it. I still like the fact that they're engaged and, but before we go down this rabbit hole, I would encourage you all to just Google, is the U.S. going to war? Just do that, okay? And if you do that, you're going to see that the Wall Street Journal, the Time Magazine have all come out and actually said that they think we're going to war. Okay? So not that they're right, but, the Time actually interviewed a 4-star general, said that he believes we're going to be in war by 2025. Mike Minihan, I think his name was. He's a 4-star general. Mike Pence, the ex-VP, said the same thing. Russia came out and warned NATO of its Western support. Does that mean we're going to war? Of course not. The point is, things are happening, guys, and these are what some very, very smart people that are involved. I also watched a YouTube video with Adam Carolla and Tucker Carlson that he interviewed him last week or the week before, I think. And Tucker Carlson said, I will bet my house that the U.S. is going to war. Okay. Now, could they all be wrong? Of course. But the point is, you should be watching this stuff and and then what can you do potentially? What should you do if this does happen, right? What are the signs? So I'm sure we got some people.
Yeah, we have no comments on your soapbox.
Really?
Yeah, nothing.
0? Okay.
Crickets.
Well, hopefully.
All right. So the first thing, basically the way we jump to these conclusions are looking at history. So the best way to figure out, what's going to happen is to look at historically what has happened when countries have gone to war. And there's a lot of case studies on this.
Yeah.
So
Danille did she's the A student here, by the way, if you haven't noticed. She did a huge deep dive on this because we were having this discussion on our road trip.
Yeah, it just kind of naturally came up, what
would
happen if we did go to war?
What would happen? Like who profits, who doesn't profit?
What happens to real
Yeah,
estate?
what happens to inflation? What happens to money? All
Right.
that. I mean, those are good topics to discuss.
Yeah, just because it could happen. So the number one thing that happens when countries go to war typically is inflation. So the reason that inflation happens is because money has to be printed in order to pay for the war. Because this printed money is going to pay for salaries, weapons, all those things. And, the government is going to have to borrow that money. So it's going to increase the national debt. And because of that, inflation helps their debt cost, because they're printing money. So they're putting more money into the system. If they're having all these new salaries, they're opening these factories, they're having things made, everyone's getting paid from government money that the government is creating. It's not really borrowing, it's creating. That's obviously going to cause more inflation. Happened in the Civil War, happened in the Second World War. If we went to a pretty big scale war, that's what would happen.
Yeah, war costs money, obviously. In fact, I think wasn't BlackRock and Chase. I saw Patrick Bet-David say something about this. There was a huge contract, like $600 million of infrastructure for Ukraine. So there are already contracts happening, and so that's already starting. Mm-hmm. There's already, and we haven't even talked about the reconstruction afterwards. We're just talking about the funding of the actual war. Obviously, none of us hopes that this would ever happen, but you have to look at this objectively of what's actually happening right now. People are pissed at us.
So then the second point that happens is what we just discussed, which is an increase in the national debt. Now you have to look at these two things together. So inflation is good for a country's national debt in the way that they can pay it down quicker.
That's a good point.
So
let's talk about why.
Yeah.
Because it's so on point number one, guys, we talk about inflation. So if you had, let's go back to, let's say 2 years ago when inflation was 2 to 3%. If you owned fixed rate debt, let's say you had debt at 3 and you had $1 million of debt. You still have $1 million of debt at 3 today, 2 years later. So what's happened in that 2-year period is you're now borrowing at less than inflation because inflation has been well above 2 and 3%. Now, of course, it's down, but in the last 2 years it has not been. So what that's done is it makes that $1 million that you had in debt from 2 years ago worth less because things have inflated. So it's the same thing with national debt. So debt is debt. Right? So think about something that you've owned. Maybe some of you guys have owned some debt for, 10 years. Well, think about that debt. It's worth less. It's inflated away over time. It's eroded. That seems like a small number at the time. That's why we always say get fixed rate debt. So if these two things happen, fixed rate debt is going to be the game to play. Right? And the U.S. can play the same thing with their national debt. Because if the U.S. has debt and inflation hits, then it erodes the national debt in the same manner that it would erode your debt.
Absolutely. And so the third thing that would happen is an easing of the monetary policy. So to finance the war spending, the government will have to issue additional Treasury bonds. And the Federal Reserve, in turn, will have to keep interest rates low to minimize the debt service coverage for the U.S. Treasury.
Right. So what that'll do, it'll create inflation because, again, cheap money, if this happens, obviously it's going, typically, they're going to lower the interest rate, so the cost to borrow is going to be less. It'll be less for everyone. So what will happen? Well, prices will go up just like we already saw. That's what happens when money is cheap to borrow. When money's cheap to borrow, it creates price inflations. It creates it in everything, with subcontractors, with appliances, with autos, with real estate. It doesn't really matter what's financed at all, actually. And even student debt, student loans. So when things are cheap to borrow against, it actually allows the price of those things to go up, and so that is something that also could potentially happen.
Right, which is good for those that have own a property already and they want to get in a lower mortgage rate. It's not so great for those that are just relying on things that don't move with inflation. And J9 asked, isn't that going to worsen housing cost? And inflation, housing moves with inflation. So things move with inflation. So it would definitely do that.
Yeah. And I think, so if you bought something in the last 2 years, let's say, or you have some kind of floating debt that you're getting killed on right now, that this would benefit that. If I don't know if Mike Minihan, the 4-star general, is accurate or not, but he said that he believed we would be in a war by 2025. Well, so some of these measures would have to be in place prior to that. Again, not something that we want, but if it does happen, you can probably expect that rates will go down.
Absolutely. The fourth thing that you see in war is unstable energy prices. Oil and natural gas are going to rise sharply because you need a lot of oil and natural gas.
So you want to be on the right side of that.
Well, I guess even in the Gulf War, which some of you would remember, oil prices for a barrel went from $21 to $46 in 6 months. So it tripled. Doubled. Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys. So again, this is how I want you to look at it. What positions would you want to be in if this happened? You would want to be on the other side of energy, right? So if energy's cheap right now, then of course you want to be in that. And by the way, I'm not advocating you go buy oil and gas. I'm just telling you that these are things historically that have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. The fifth thing that happens is food prices would increase, which would make sense because oil and gas would be more expensive, and also natural gas is a fertilizer. So you're competing for that.
Yep.
So that's the fifth thing, is the food prices would increase. And then the sixth thing that would happen is shortages would worsen. So all of these things equal increased inflation, really.
Yep. Yeah.
And potentially lower rates.
Right. And what's interesting is, as you guys know, the Fed has been working hard to try to lower inflation through these rate increases, and it's worked in a lot of areas. You know, there's a case to be made that core inflation has not gone down as much, and that they still might increase here even next week. I think they meet again, right, Jerry? Is that right? Next week. You know, but who knows? But the point is it's been 11 or 12 rate increases, as you know, and inflation's come down, and everybody's jumping on board with that, and that's kind of the narrative right now. So all of that, you know, is now in place, but it is killing, you know, our industry, you know, the real estate industry, right? And I think that we could see these everybody wants these low interest rates. I don't really see them coming back, at least through next year.
But a war could trigger that.
A war could, yeah, of course, right? So the point is, it's not going to happen quickly, obviously, but it's something that you guys all need to have on your radar. You need to just be chipping away at this and slowly get educated on this and just watch, because with anything like this, you can be on the right side of it. That's all. You know, as we start to look at these things and you start to invest your money heading into some kind of a crisis like this, why wouldn't you just keep an open mind and look to be on the right side of it? Even if it doesn't happen, it's good to be educated.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you own real estate, you know, real estate moves with inflation. So we have a supply and demand issue. We're going to continue to have a supply and demand issue for the foreseeable future. So if, you know, all of this happens and rates go down and people's salaries go up and they add more jobs for the war, you probably will see housing prices continue to go up.
They could, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And rent prices.
Yeah. Right. So, you know.
But the thing is about, you know, and they always say, like, is war good for an economy? And I was looking into that because I was curious about it. And it seems like it is during the war, but the rebuilding stage after is where everything gets hit pretty hard.
Yeah. It's funny. Henry Ford had a great quote years ago. He said, you want to stop a war? Find out who profits. I thought that was an interesting quote.
Yeah.
You know, just go there, because it's going to be profitable for some and not for others.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we don't go to war. That would be the ideal thing. It's very interesting to me, you know, with Jerome Powell and the Fed trying to get down inflation, they would know that if we go into a war, inflation is going to go astronomically high.
It has
again.
to, yeah.
So will be interesting to me to see if the U.S. government actually will go to war, knowing that they're going into inflation.
Yeah. If we're going to be spending that kind of money, guys, it's going to come from somewhere. And as you guys know, the government doesn't have the money. You know, the tax revenues that do not pay the expenses. So they have to print, and they have been printing. And so this would just be one more piece on top of that.
Yeah, another reason to print.
Yeah, that's so not good news. Not a great subject. I don't even know if you know how live and active it is today. But I thought it's something. It's interesting that you should be watching, because I'm watching it. We're talking about it. People are talking about this. You know, more publicly than not. Just Google it. You'll see it's been in every major publication in the last 6 to 8 months.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see, you know, what we do. I know, you know, we're at a point in the Ukraine war, it seems, where, you know, Ukraine needs more funding or more backup or, you know, something. And then Biden was even talking about potential war with China this weekend. So it's just, if it happens, like, those are things that happen during times of war.
Yep.
So we're going to...
What side of it do you want to be on?
So we're going to jump into our questions of the week.
Did we get any good interaction from that or no?
No, we had a little bit, you know, but...
I can't blame you. It's not a great subject. Yeah.
Well, it's also 9/11, true.
Yeah.
So anyways, in order to sign up, Jerry, what is the link for people to sign up for Ken's premium account? KenMcElroy.com/join now. That way you guys can ask questions. Our first question comes from Jay. He said, "Hey Ken, would you recommend using a $20,000 line of credit to help with a down payment? I will hopefully be looking to buy a house hack in 2024, God willing. I'm in Canada."
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, it depends, Jay, on the price. What you're paying for that line of credit. But at the end of the day, it just has to cash flow. So it doesn't really matter where the money comes from. If it's a line of credit or a loan from a friend, it's going to come with an interest rate on it. So, Danille, you've used lines of credit to buy stuff before.
I have, I don't know if I recommend it, or it depends on your situation.
It does depend.
If you can pay off your line of credit in a year or two, then I would say go for it. But if you can't pay it off and you're just hoping to maybe put a couple $100 a month on it and it's going to sit, line of credits are adjustable. And I think that is a little bit of a risky purchase. Plus, I don't know about in Canada, but in the U.S., a lot of times, if that's the only money that you're putting down, the banks don't always love that because you're really not putting money down.
Yeah.
It's stretching you further because you're financing essentially the whole property.
You bring up a good point. Each time that Danille's used a line, she's always had a plan to pay it off within a year.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So that it should be a short-term loan. So if you have income coming in from other things or it's a great way to get into real estate, get the tax benefits and all that, but I would have a short-term plan on that.
Yeah, because you don't really want to be in, debt. And plus, you don't want to be too leveraged. Like if you're going to house hack and you're going to have a mortgage for 80% of it, and then you're going to have a credit line for 20% of it, the question then is like, are you making with, high interest rates, how they are now? I don't know how they are in Canada, but are you going to be making enough to cover all of it? So you just have to think of that as well. But you could always get a credit line, hold on to it, and wait and see, because you don't have to put anything on it right away. The next question comes from Rose. She said, "I want to move someone in to live with me, but I would rather go month to month versus do a 1-year lease in case we don't get along. Is that okay? And what other things should I look for?"
Well, the biggest thing is an application. You can be, you can set up guidelines. You can't discriminate, of course, but you can hand select who you want to live there. I mean, your friend's going through that right now. The ladies are very specific about who they want over and the times and all that kind of stuff. So they put some rules on their house. You can have house rules, but month to month obviously is easy. But some people might not want a month to month, and so typically you can't. You got to be careful with this too, because it can't just be subjective. Like you can't just, I don't like this person, so I want them out. You know what I mean? That's the whole point of the landlord-tenant law. The tenants have rights too. So, there has to be very concrete reasons as to why you might not want them there. Now, if it's just an inconvenience and you're just trying to test it out and all that kind of stuff, you just need to be upfront with them and say, I've never done this before, and I'd rather do a short-term lease and just see if I can deal with it. As long as you're transparent and upfront with it, then I think you're going to be fine. But you got to be careful. You can't just move people out just because you have a feeling.
Well, I have a few things with it. So I think if you're going to do month to month, for one, you obviously need to lay out in the lease that it's month to month, and that they have to give you a 30-day and you have to give them legally a 30-day notice. So you can't just be like, hey, your lease is up in a week. I don't think this is working out, right? So you have to give them 30 days. But then you also don't want them to tell you the day before the rent's due, hey, I'm not feeling it anymore and I'm moving out.
Yeah, it can work both ways.
So you want to make sure in the lease that they have to give you a 30-day, you have to give them a 30-day. The other thing that I recommend is to furnish the unit. So if you're going to rent a 1-bedroom, in your home and you're going to rent it month to month, I'm sorry, but I don't want to move my furniture in for 30 days to then you tell me that you're just not feeling it and I'm going to have to move out.
That's a good
because
point.
that's going to cause more of a problem, right? So, either, you need to move their, furnish it, or if you kick them out within less than, let's say, a year or so, just know that's probably going to be an issue and you should probably be ready to pony up some money for them to move.
Right.
Because it gets really dicey, and you might want to question if you're that worried about it, if you want to be want to have a roommate at all. I think if you do a credit and background check, you get some references, you meet them, you're clicking with them, I would personally at least do 6 months so that they at least know they have somewhere to live for 6 months of time.
And don't forget, they get something for paying you. I think that's important.
Yeah.
The tenant actually gets something too. You get money, they get something too.
Right.
So you're not completely in control.
Yeah.
The tenant does have rights.
Yeah, and maybe they don't like living with you.
Yeah. So, it can work both ways. It's a good question.
Well, and if you're that particular, I'd make sure they don't have animals. Like, be very clear on if boyfriends or girlfriends are allowed to stay over. Like, just make sure everything's laid out in the lease and your house rules are laid out in the lease so that, or they signed an addendum or something specifically for that. But I think that, go into it with a positive attitude and just be really picky on who you want to live with you.
But also understand that there is going to be disruption for you. Like if they have to use the same entrance, if they have a key to the house, there's, is their door going to be open or closed? Are they going to use the kitchen? Do they want to listen to music? Those are real things.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to have friends over or not? Like
Right.
There's a zillion things you got to think through. So if they're paying you and you don't have rules around any of that stuff, then, you can't get upset.
Absolutely. So our next question comes from Justin. He's asking, what flooring is ideal for a rental? Right now I have all tile.
Yeah. So again, this is a great question, actually. So Danille has tile in one of her places, and it sucks. It looks
terrible.
so bad.
So
It's
bad.
these small little 8-inch square ceramic white ones with black grout.
And they put black grout, honestly, black grout. And I've tried to look at lightening the grout, and it's almost as expensive as just replacing the floor.
Okay, so the reason I bring that up is because the tenants are looking at that. They're like, the floor sucks. Okay, so I know you're probably talking about from a maintenance standpoint, but don't forget about aesthetics. Like, people look at stuff, and is it dated? I know you guys have gone on and looked at houses, online, and you see that old Mexican tile or maybe vinyl or whatever it is, and you're probably going to pass. So same thing with appliances or countertops or whatever it is. So the short answer is any kind of hard wood. They've got this composite stuff that's really nice. It looks like wood. That that you don't have to replace after every tenant. You definitely want not to have carpet. And then the right kind of tile. So we always go with a neutral tile. And trust me, you always want to buy maybe 10% more because a tile will break in front of a door, or people, whatever it is, they'll crack or whatever. And so you need the ability to be able to switch out these tiles. And these flooring companies, they're very smart. They do a run of a certain look or a certain color, and then they don't.
Well, I learned that the hard way because my unit flooded in the kitchen, and unfortunately my water heater had flooded the year before, so all the additional flooring that I bought that was in the closet had ruined, and so there was no more flooring. So luckily, because it ended at the kitchen, I could cut that area off and lay down more flooring. But if not, I would have had to, redo the whole entire place.
Yep.
But I do think, like a good vinyl plank, the worst ones are carpet and wood. Like, when people put wood in their rental, I'm like, what are
real
you
wood
thinking? Like
about.
real wood, it's like animals are going to, pee on that. People are going to scratch it. It's going to dent. Like, there's, when we were at an Airbnb over the summer, we were in one with real wood. I dropped a little bit of olive oil on the floor and you could see it, and it's the littlest thing. And so, of course, you can just oil the whole floor and get that out, but still it ruins and you're going to have tenants in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was gorgeous, by the way.
It's so pretty.
The guy had redone this floor. Obviously, it had been a 50, 60-year-old floor. And Danille dropped some olive oil on there, and it absorbed immediately. So those are the kinds of things that you need to watch. And but any kind of something when you have tenants moving in and out, or Airbnb, let's say, you want the least amount of maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like somebody on YouTube had recommended the luxury vinyl plank. That's what I like too. It's waterproof. Yep. It's easy to put down. It's cheap.
Vinyl plank's a really good option.
So our next question comes from Miranda from the Inner Circle. She's asking, is it okay to take a high rate and assume it'll go down in the future? So a high interest rate is what I think she means.
No and no. It's a great question, first of all. You can't assume the rate's going to go down. So I think, you got to be careful on this. Now, nothing wrong with doing a short-term high rate that you can replace out later. That's a different strategy. I've done that. So, short-term money to buy something. So during the fix and flips, the hard money lending, is a huge piece of single-family flips. But that money's out a very short period of time, and it gets so here's how it works. You buy something that's older, and you use hard money, and then you renovate it, and it's worth more, and then you sell it. So you might be in that hard money for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, let's say, or even longer. Hopefully not too much longer, because that starts to eat away your profit. The point is that you need to be able to replace that out. So there's nothing wrong with using high rate money, but assuming it's going to go down is a mistake. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, and it also means that you just need to have a good plan to replace it.
Yeah, and if you're, in a higher mortgage and you're thinking mortgage rates are high right now and they might go down in a few years, as long as the property is cash flowing now, even if it's minimal, then I think that's a good strategy. But I don't think it's a good strategy if you're just going to keep paying the mortgage at what it is and losing money, right. And maybe you can't afford it because it could be we don't know when interest rates are going to go down. Everyone said it was going to be fall of this year, and we all know now it's not true. And so everyone is now saying it's going to be next year, but it might not be. It might not be for a while. So you don't want to keep feeding this negative interest rate.
But also, guys, just know that these rates today, if you go back and look, these are normal rates. 6 and 7% interest rates are about average if you take a look historically, but those of you who came out of the last few years, you've got super spoiled. So, from somebody who's been in the game a long time, if you should be able to make the deal work at these kinds of rates. And if you're using hard money or something really high, then you just have to have a replacement for it. That's all. I mean, guys, this is the simplest. If you let's say you don't have the money, you find a vacant building, you use hard money to buy it, but if you have a tenant to replace it out right away, you can go back to the bank and refinance out of it. That's okay. That's just a short-term cost of using somebody else's money at a higher rate. It's a win-win for everyone, but just got to make sure it gets replaced out.
Absolutely. So Michael's asking, I'm looking to get a rental with foundation issues. In your experience, if I get them to pay to fix these issues, would you still make the purchase? This
is a big one. Probably not. So I've had all kinds of problems with foundations over the years. So for those of you who don't know, obviously the foundation is usually the cement below the structure. And in Arizona and in other areas, we have what's called expansive soil. And expansive soil is it's kind of like quicksand. Now, why would somebody ever build on something like that? Well, they don't think they are, because there's all these soil tests and things that are done when you're building. So, but it does happen. And so these settling cracks are normal, but it can be really, really, really bad. We had a property in Austin where we bought it. We knew it had foundation problems, and we did a bunch of work. And what happened is the insides of the units were actually compromised. So we had settling, in the units themselves, because you don't know where things are going to be a problem. I had a property in Portland, Oregon that broke in half. Like, if you can believe that. It was like an 8-unit building, let's say 4 and 4. And it settled, and it broke in half, and the seller had repaired it. We actually, because it had siding, and you could see like the siding went all the way up, all the way from the ground all the way up. And can you imagine that? So these and don't forget, foundations sometimes and subfloors oftentimes have electrical and plumbing and those kinds of things in them as well. So you just got to be super careful, and if you do buy it, it comes with potentially more issues. And also, I think there might be some lender inspections and things around this as well, because foundation cracks can lead to bigger things.
Well, and that's funny because Tommy just said my neighbor has a cracked foundation, and when the snow comes and it dries, the kitchen fills with water.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And you can get different functional issues. You can get mold. There's all these things when you have a not a good foundation.
I would really, really look at this seriously. My gut says to pass, unless you get a smoking deal on this thing, and then you get 2 or 3 different kinds of opinions on it. Obviously a contractor is going to tell you they can repair it. Period. Like, because what are they going to say? Oh, sorry, this isn't going to work. No, they're not going to say that. So, you want to really, really dig into this issue. It's a good one good that you brought it up.
Julian said, "Imagine if that happened on your first one."
Ooh.
In half.
Yeah, that was. Oh my gosh, we couldn't believe it. Actually, it's the only time I've ever seen it.
D-Storm's asking, is the foundation a fixable item? Like, can you completely fix a foundation?
I've never seen it. I'm sure contractors and people who have done it on this channel will tell you that they can, and they have. It has more to do with the soil under it. So that's actually, it's that you can fix all kinds of stuff, but if there's expansive soil or there's shifting of the soil, in this particular case in Portland, it was on a riverbank. So what happened was the river flooded. It was like a flood like back in the 1980s or something, and obviously it was like this flood went into Portland. It was downtown, and it messed with the riverbank, and so it compromised the actual structure that was on the riverbank, and that's what happened. So it has everything to do with what's under the foundation. That's so
basically, if you fix it, it doesn't. You could have issues
Yeah,
again, and foundation fixes aren't cheap.
Correct.
They're
right.
not cheap.
Yeah. You gotta it's not about the foundation, guys. The foundation isn't faulty at all. The foundation is breaking because of what's under it, and that's actually the lesson.
Mr. Fletcher said, "Yes, you can fix it, but Ken is right. It's about the soil and the footing." Lyle is asking, Danille, would it be smarter to invest in building an ADU, additional dwelling unit, if you own a single family instead of looking to buy with a mortgage, since the cost of debt is so high? So I love the ADU.
It's a great thing.
We were in Franklin, Tennessee, on our trip, and there were so many ADUs. We rented an Airbnb, and they built it straight up, and then they ripped the garage down in the back, and then they built another one straight up, which literally it probably added so much cash flow to whoever initially did that. But even if you don't have that much space, we saw people, turn them into garages. Turn their garages into ADUs and just have little, like, 1-bedroom apartment ADUs. We think they're great. It's a great idea.
And by the way, we looked. The house was listed that we ended up renting. It was brand new. It was $2.5 million, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the ADU was what jacked the price up, because they were showing it as like you could occupy the front or the back and rent the front or whatever combination you wanted. It wasn't for me because it shared the same driveway, that one. But I know Thatch, our good friend Thatch, I will put his stuff up here. He pitches his stuff up in Seattle. And I know our friends in Scottsdale, they live on an acre. They're looking at doing it in the back. So they have an alley in the back where there's a garage, and they have the home in the front, and they have a lot of yard space. So they're gonna put an ADU in the back. And so they do lose the garage in the back, which is a second garage, but they've turned it into an ADU. In fact, the one we had in Denver, remember? Yeah. This house was really nice, right on the park in downtown Denver. It's a long, narrow lot. So the guy he Airbnb'd the front, and then he had an ADU in the back that was clearly a garage. It was beautiful brick and all that. So it's a really, really nice place with a yard in between. So the parking sucked because it was downtown Portland, but
downtown Denver.
Downtown Denver. But but he had converted that, and he was killing it. He was making he was in the insurance business, and he was making a lot of money. So ADUs are a big deal if the city allows. And now with the affordability problems, cities are really starting to look at this. They're saying, because they used to only allow one livable unit on a lot, let's say, and now ADUs are starting to pop up. We're starting to see them more. Keep in mind that in some cases, many times, there's restrictions on the size. I've seen maximum 1,000 feet, stuff like that.
Right, absolutely. And Lyle said that where he lives in California, they're trying to encourage ADUs. Yep. And because there's such a housing shortage, they're relying on people for that. But even places that don't normally, like where I'm from in Ohio, ADUs really haven't been a thing. The city's never been a big fan of them. But these houses that like my brother has sit on these really big lots. And I think that, you should, especially if you're in a smaller town, talk to your city council, talk to the board, see if you can get it approved and maybe start that trend in your area, work with the zoning laws because all these cities are dealing with affordable housing issues. And a very easy solution for them to add an additional unit is for you to build it, you to fund it, and then another person live on these huge lots. And that's what we were seeing in Franklin.
Well, we saw it in Asheville too. We were in Asheville, North Carolina. Awesome, by the way. Went to the Vanderbilt estate, the Biltmore. And we were in that coffee shop with that gal, remember? Yeah. And she was working in this coffee shop, and I was asked about rent, and she's like, it's like 2 bedrooms are over $2,000 in this little town, and so it's hard to sustain. So you got to be thinking that way. So if you can build these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 800 square foot places. You're gonna kill it if you're, let's say, under $1,500 or even $2,000 a month, because these people get their own standalone place, and I think it's a really, really, really good option. It's a great investment strategy moving forward. And to your point, I would rather do that, than try to fight some of these high rates.
Well, and not just that, but you're increasing the value of your own property. My friend did that in California. They put in an ADU with their original home, and they ended up selling it. And actually, they didn't even build the ADU. They just got the permitting for it. So that's another thing, too. They had to fight the city for the permitting. So then once it was approved, then they were able to sell the home for more just based on that.
That's a good point. In fact, the house we were in Franklin, the lady clearly bought the front house with the intention of building the back house. That's for sure, because it happened. So you can use let's say today's 7% rate, buy that front house. But if you have the ability to put a secondary house in there, you've now increased the value. It's a value add on the same lot. So it's a great strategy moving forward, especially as we head into this affordability problem, which is not going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our next question. If you're enjoying this, please hit the like button. It really helps us out. We love that. Let's try to get over 100 likes. Mr. Fletcher's asking, with so much money in the market, even if housing starts to collapse, will the prices of homes go down? Or will the rate drop to kick the can down the road as a temporary fix?
What do you think?
Well, I think I don't see housing dropping anytime soon because there's a supply and demand issue. Everyone thinks that there's some kind of housing crash on the horizon. And we even thought that at the very beginning of the pandemic. But what has happened is when the Fed dropped the rate and everyone's in 2 and 3% mortgages, it's they're not selling their homes. And actually, even my friend Michelle, she has a bunch of rentals in Mesa, single family homes, and she has a few that are empty right now. And she was saying that she talked to her property management company and they said that there's so many more houses on the rental market right now than there were before because people are choosing not to sell and to keep it and to rent it. And then also people are struggling with Airbnbs, so they're turning those into long-term rentals as well. So I don't, see any kind of rental collapse because there's just supply and demand. And then also to your point, there is money out there. And so any kind of deal it seems to be going. And I've been following the Scottsdale market and things are starting to sit longer but they're really not dropping that much and they're still selling. They're just sitting for 20, 30, 40 days versus, 1 day, but they are selling. Most of the things are selling.
I think, you guys are going to see Jason Hartman, and we're going to have this great happy hour, and hopefully you guys all join. He has a great kitchen sink analogy. And basically what he said is if the kitchen sink represents what listings are traditionally, and the water's full in the sink is about half full or even less. So it's still way below the normal listings. And if the faucet represents new listings, it's on a trickle. And if the drain represents sales, it's also hardly open. So there's a trickle for new listings. There's a drain or reduced sales at the moment, but we're still very much down on listings. And hopefully he'll do that analysis because I thought it was a really good way to say it. And so that's the long version to say that we still have historically a shortage of listings. And people have trapped equity, and they're not going to trade out a home today when the rates are double. They're just not, because why would you do that? Why would you go find the exact home, or even you'd have to actually reduce what you're living in order to probably pay the same amount. So and that's why I keep telling people, even though that you guys are looking at these articles out there about rent, I'm telling you, we're gonna go on this pretty aggressive, hardcore rent run here in the next 3 to 5 years as a result of a shortage. So home builders have stopped building, multifamily builders have stopped building in spite of the headlines. You go, the stuff that you're seeing hit now started a year to 2 years ago. And they had to. They're just finishing these projects. And so don't be duped by these short-term articles that you're seeing, because there's going to be a huge gap of no construction coming because of the prices. You guys are all, typically most of the people on here are, frustrated because home prices are high and interest rates are high. But if you're trying to build something starting a year ago, you put that on hold. So, it's this affordability thing is here for a while. Unaffordability, excuse me.
Right. And I do want to point out, Lyle said, he gets involved in his own city council meetings. He speaks up, and it does make a difference. And when you live in small towns, it does. Like now, if you live in Phoenix, sure, you can try, but really most of the time it's kind of the bigger names have a little bit more power. But when you're in your small town council meetings to, change your local zoning laws, you have a lot of power to do that.
Yeah, it's a good point, Lyle. Thanks for doing that. It's true. We have a Mikey Taylor, who was at Limitless, same thing. He's involved in California. And I think you do have a voice. They don't understand those folks on the councils and the elected, most of them don't understand real estate like you guys do, and you're sitting here watching. They're not. They've got a zillion other things they're dealing with. So they need somebody on those councils that are educated and can help them navigate this stuff.
Well, here's
whether they listen or not.
Right, and here's what they know: they have a housing shortage, and they have skyrocketing rents that are rising really quickly, and people are complaining, about that to them a lot. So if you come with a solution that maybe they haven't thought about, or maybe they said no to a year ago, but now it could be different because things are changing.
Yeah, what you got to think about it. What would attract money or investment into a community? Well, not rent control. Because I'm not going to invest in a market that's going to cap my income, just like you wouldn't. I just go next door. I'll go to Idaho, as an example. That's so. Money goes where it's treated best, and so, the more restrictions a city has, I get it. Like if there's affordable problems and there's rent issues and rent's going up, all that stuff, they have to take a look hard at that, because you have to figure that out. But it's a public-private partnership. Sorry, a public-private partnership. So the ones that are working are the ones where the cities or the counties or the states are actually partnering with people, developers or home builders or landlords or whatever, and saying, how do we solve this together? How do we keep? And there's a lot of choices. It's just that they don't. What they do is they hear from tenants that say our rent's gone up or I've been evicted, and that's what goes to the headlines. And that might be true, but then they start imposing more things, and all that does is drive prices up in that market, because, like I said, good money goes where it's treated best.
Exactly. So our next question comes from Lori. So she's an Inner Circle member. She said, if your tenant is just annoying, I've had this. They text over little issues. Is that a reason to not renew them, or should I just suck it up? I think I could get that same rent from someone else.
Danille's got this one down because of...
Well,
just talk about what happened.
Sometimes there's pain in the ass fees for rentals.
Yeah, but talk about some of the solutions, because I thought you handle it pretty well.
I do. So there's a few things. So one is, don't have them text you. They shouldn't be texting you. My tenants will only text me if they have an emergency. Fire, flood, blood. And I tell them that. Fire, flood, blood, text me. If you text me for any other reason, email the management company, which is also me, at this email, and they'll get back to you, And so I do want them to call and text me if it's an emergency. Like I just had, this weekend, one of my AC units was condensing and dripping all over the floor. I don't want to wait on that for 4 days until, I get back to them, right? So, but when there is, the door's not closing right, or the screen's broke or whatever, I don't want that as a text message to me. So, you need a little bit of separation from that. And not everything is an emergency. So you have to put your own boundaries in place. It's like any other relationship. When I had my tenants texting me, they text me, hey, the
light bulbs.
Yeah, the light bulb's out. The shower curtain's not, falling down. But then they're texting me like, hey, can someone come over tonight? Like, da-da-da. And it's like, no. So now when they email me, I give it a few days and I email them back. If it's an emergency, I will get someone there within 24 hours. But if it's not an emergency and it's not ruining anything, then it's, you shouldn't have to stop your life at dinner to freak out to make sure the handyman's coming that night, right? But there's also something too for me with my tenants is, if a tenant never ever bothers me and they are very easy, I am more likely to, not want to increase their rent because they're not bothering me. They're an easy tenant, right? But if somebody is texting me all the time, then I have to take my time in account when I'm thinking of their rental prices, right? So I might think, you know what, like I'm going to move this to market because I invest a lot of money sending people over to this house all the time. You know what I mean?
Well, didn't you you also put some something in their lease about handyman and how often they come?
I did. I put that, initially I was sending a handyman for everything because I was trying to be a really nice landlord, and I'm still a very good landlord. But now I have it in my lease where they're only to make the unit habitable. So what that means is if your AC is not working, they're going to fix it. If your fridge goes out, we're going to replace it. If, the water heater's not working, we're going to make sure that it gets fixed. But if you rip your cabinet off, which happened, I'm not sending someone out to fix it. If your shower curtain won't hang up, you need to call a handyman. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you should be able to fix that. I used to do those things when I was there. So, you should only be making the place habitable. Damage, things that they do, you shouldn't be fixing. They need to fix that. If the toilet clogs because they flushed too much toilet paper down it, like, they need to call a plumber, So you shouldn't be responsible. You should only be responsible for what goes out that makes it so they cannot live there.
And this is typically in the lease. So this is after some pain, right? So
Yes.
Danille figured this out after a while because what was happening is she would, by the way, these maintenance guys are busy too, and Danille's busy. So she'll call and they might be a week out.
Yeah, my handyman will be like 2 or 3 weeks out. Like, I have 3 of them. Sometimes I can't get somebody there for like 3 weeks, right? But the truth of it is like your AC people, your water heater people, plumbers, they'll all come right away, right? Because they're more into that. They have a company. But your individual handyman, like it's not going to be a rush, So even if it's something that I'm going to fix, it still might take 3 weeks if the handyman can't get there for 3 weeks.
Right, and one of the things, I guess it started with the annoying tenant, but you can do that quite easily just inside of the lease itself.
Well, and not just that, but what I would do is I would be like, okay, my handyman can't get there for 3 weeks, but this random handyman I found can get there in 2 days. So I booked this random handyman, and he would either bill me so much money because, I don't know him, or he didn't fix it right, and then we are still, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to accommodate my tenant, but it's costing me so much more money, and then they're annoyed if it doesn't get fixed the first time and they have to be home again. So you really just need to put the boundaries in. And it's funny because, my girlfriend, we were talking over the weekend, and she rents. And she's like, yeah, I have a property management company. She's like, I still have a leak around my toilet. It's been 2 months and I'm still trying to get them to send somebody out. And so you realize, you are a good landlord. You're fixing, like I would have that fixed within a week, right? But she's been waiting 2 months. They still don't even respond to her. So you are being a good landlord. You just don't need to fix everything the next day, because if somebody was living there, they wouldn't fix something the next day either. You just have to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is to fix the annoying piece is Danille had a pretty frank conversation with her too.
It was a him, but yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I had a frank conversation with him and was like, listen,
this is not going to happen any longer.
Yeah.
This is the box you're in. And if you go outside of the box, it's going to cost you money. And that's it, right?
Right.
And then that changed she took control of the situation. She changed the tone. And I think in that particular case, you said at the end of your lease, I have the option not to renew you. If this continues. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a fair comment, right?
Yep. And I have to laugh because Lyle said, I have a tenant. She's an old lady. She's having health issues. So I let her nephew stay there for a couple of months to help her. Now, over a year later, he's still there and he's a criminal now.
Oh, no.
So, but you have to have those frank conversations with your tenant. To answer your question, I don't think that you should end a release just because she's annoying. I do think you put clear boundaries and clear rules. You have a talk with her. Hey, I'm going to renew you, but this is what's changing. And if you're not okay with that, then you shouldn't renew. And that's what I would do.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We got exactly 100 likes. Make sure you sign up for Ken's Happy Hour. It's for our premium members. And you just need to go to kenmcroy.com/join now to join. And if you are already joined, you go to kenmcroy.com/happy-hour to sign up.
And I promise next week we'll have a lighter subject. Thanks for listening this week. I know it was a tough one.
But we're back. We're back in studio.
It's good to be back.
All right. See you guys.